Hi guys, I hope you're well. So today I'm going to show you how you can make your own twig wind chime, a bit like this one here. And so when it's outside you'll be able to hear all the twigs kind of clinking against one another in the wind, or you could keep it inside as well. So all you need to begin with is to go and get some twigs, and then you also need some acrylic paint, some thread or string, scissors and paintbrush. So once you've found your twigs, you want to make sure that you've got one twig which is fairly long, like this, and then it's up to you how many twigs you're going to have hanging off this twig. I used 5 on that one. I think that's quite a nice number, but it's completely up to you. And then you want to make sure that the twigs that are hanging down aren't so long, so you might need to snap a few. You might need to get a hand with snapping the twigs. So I think I'll just do 3 for this demo. So there we go. So these are going to hang off like that. And so once we've done that, if you can bear to, it's quite nice if you peel off some of the bark that's around these twigs, because that's going to make a nice kind of smooth surface to paint on. So you can just use your fingers just to pick off the really flaky bits of bark. Okay, and so once you've got rid of all the really uneven thick bits of bark, then you're ready to paint the twigs. So I'm using acrylic paint, but you could also use poster paint. And you just want to think about what colours would look nice together, what if you've got like a particular colour scheme that you want to follow, or yeah, it's completely up to you. I'm kind of going with blues and greens. And you just want to paint all over the twigs, and it's nice to do each twig in a different colour. And once you've painted the whole twig, then you can go back, and when it's dry you can paint patterns on top of the base colour to make the wind chime a bit more interesting. Okay, and so once the twigs are dry, then you can, like I said before, go back and paint some patterns onto them. So think about what colour you use, so that you use a colour which really stands out. So I'm going to use this kind of zingy yellowy orange, and you could paint spots, stripes, spirals, whatever takes your fancy really, but you want to do it all around the twig, so that it's not just on one side, because these twigs are going to move around quite a lot in the breeze, and you want them to be pretty and patterned from all angles. Okay, and you just want to carry on going, adding patterns to your twigs until you're happy with them really. So I've added 2 different colours of the spots there, but to be honest, probably the more decoration and the more patterns you put on the twigs, the more pretty and beautiful they're going to look. But once you have decided that you're finished with that, then you just need to let the twigs dry. You want the paint to be thoroughly dry before we do the next stage. So you might want to use a hairdryer to dry them, or you could just go away and have a cup of tea and then come back when they're dry. Okay, and so once they're dry, then it's time to assemble your wind chime. So as well as using twigs, you could use any other kind of natural things that you've found, like for example this pine cone. That makes quite a nice rustly noise, and that will look quite pretty in there. Also, maybe if you've got any shells, seashells, you could use them, or maybe even some metal bottle caps, you could tie thread around them. So lots of options of other things you could add into it to get some other sounds. But once you've kind of got all your bits and pieces, you want to lie them out like this, so you've got your longer stick for the top, and then these are the sticks and the pine cone that are going to hang off the top one. And you want to get your thread and find the end of it. There we go. And string will also look nice. And you want to tie this around the top of the twig, like so. And you might need a bit of a hand with this, but that's all right. So we want to tie it with a double knot so that it remains nice and secure. And once you've tied it around, then just trim off this extra bit of thread because it doesn't look that nice. Okay, and then you want to lie it down, and you want this piece of thread to be the length of how far away the twig is going to be from this other twig, and then you want to leave some extra for tying another knot. So I'm going to kind of have about this much length on that twig. And then we're going to move on down the line and do the same thing to the next twig there. Okay, so I've now got all of my twigs and pine cone with the thread tied to their end, like this. And so now I'm going to tie this end of the thread around this main long stick. I'm going to wrap it around twice and then tie it. And then tie it into a double knot, like so. And you can play around with how far away you want these twigs to be from the main stick. Actually, I think that's a bit far away, so I'm going to redo it. I think that's a bit better. So wrap it around and then tie it. And don't worry about wasting the thread or string when you cut it off, because it's difficult if you're trying to tie a knot and you don't have much of this length to work with, making it more tricky than it needs to be. Once you've tied it, then just snip off that extra end like that. And then you want to carry on doing the same thing with the rest of your twigs all the way along the length. And you can decide how far apart you want them to be or how close together, just what looks nice. You also want to think about whether you want your twigs to be hung at roughly the same height, or maybe you want one to be starting lower down or higher up, so you can just play around with that too. Okay, and so once you've tied your twigs to your main twig, the last thing to do is to then just use another length of thread, and we're going to tie it to this end and this end so that it can be hung. Whoop. So you want to lie it down like so and find the end. Ooh, of the thread, and we'll tie that on here. And then you can decide how long you want this top hanging piece to be. I think that looks about right. So then we will tie this on here. Alright, so now we've got our beautiful twig wind chime. The last thing you can do is, if you want to hang it on a nail, you can pinch the top edge like this and tie that in a knot, and that will make a nice little loop like so. Alright, so I hope you give that a go at home if you fancy it.